When I speak of the narcissistic mind, I do not speak merely of vanity, nor of the shallow preoccupation with the mirror, but of a deeper psychic distortion that arises when the original wound of childhood festers in the dark corridors of the soul. The narcissist is not born in arrogance, he is forged in neglect. He is not in love with himself, but with a reflection that guards him from pain. His obsession with the image is a desperate ritual of survival, a magic act to hold the fragmented self together. Every child, when wounded, learns to build an inner kingdom to protect the fragile seed of being. But when the wound is profound, the kingdom becomes a fortress, and the soul becomes a prisoner within its own defense. You see, the psyche is not a straight line. It is a labyrinth. Every trauma folds the labyrinth inward, bending the corridors until the child no longer knows the path back to the center. The ego, that delicate bridge between inner and outer reality, becomes like a cracked mirror, still reflecting, but distorted. The narcissist lives trapped within that mirror. He speaks to his own reflection and calls it love. Yet beneath his grandiosity lies terror, the terror of being unseen, unloved, unworthy of life itself. This pattern begins in the first theater of human existence, the home. The child looks upon the parent as the first God, the first universe. When the parent fails to mirror back love, the child concludes not that the parent is inadequate, but that he himself is unworthy of being loved. That conclusion is too painful to face directly. So the psyche performs a miracle of inversion. It creates a false self, a luminous mask that compensates for the unbearable truth. The greater the void of genuine affection, the brighter and more impenetrable the mask must become. The narcissistic personality is thus born not out of pride, but out of self-abandonment. The child has traded authenticity for survival. But the unconscious remembers always. It remembers the night the child realized that love was conditional. It remembers the silence after crying for too long without response. It remembers the moment when connection felt like death and detachment felt like safety. These memories do not fade. They sink like stones into the unconscious sea, shaping the current of the adult relationships later in life. This person will reenact the original wound endlessly, seducing admiration to fill the void, controlling others to avoid rejection, manipulating love to avoid vulnerability. He becomes an actor in a divine tragedy, repeating a childhood dream where he was both king and orphan. Yet one must not hate the narcissist, for he is a mirror of a collective wound. We live in a civilization that worships image over essence, applause over authenticity, light over shadow. The narcissistic epidemic is not the illness of the few. It is the symptom of an age that has forgotten the sacred art of reflection. The child who grows up unseen becomes the adult who cannot see himself. And what we cannot see, we must project. Thus, the narcissist's world becomes a hall of mirrors. Each person he meets is either a reflection of his glory or a threat to his illusion. He loves not the other, but the reflection the other provides. To love truly, one must risk seeing one's own shadow, and that the narcissist cannot do. In my studies of the psyche, I found that every trauma seeks symbolic resolution. The psyche speaks not in words, but in images, in dreams, myths, and archetypes. The narcissistic wound is the story of Narcissus himself, gazing into the pond, not out of self-love, but out of self-forgetting. He had never truly seen himself before. The reflection became his only reality. The myth is tragic, not because Narcissus loved himself, but because he could not distinguish between reflection and soul. So too does the narcissist drown in his own image, unable to drink the living water beneath the surface. If we journey deeper, we discover that beneath the narcissist's mask lies the archetype of the wounded child. This archetype is ancient, dwelling within every one of us. It represents the first encounter with suffering, the moment innocence collides with the world's indifference. When integrated, the wounded child becomes a healer, the wounded healer archetype, the one who transforms pain into compassion, but when repressed, it mutates into its shadow, the narcissistic protector who defends against pain by inflating the ego. The child says, unconsciously, if I cannot be loved for who I am, then I shall be adored for what I appear to be. Thus begins the unconscious pact with illusion. The narcissistic mind is a closed system. It feeds on its own reflection. It cannot truly receive love because love requires vulnerability. And vulnerability threatens the false self with extinction. So the narcissist substitutes control for intimacy. He manipulates admiration as a kind of psychic currency, trading attention for a sense of existence. Without it, he collapses inward, spiraling into the same emptiness that haunted him as a child. This collapse is the secret terror of the narcissist, to fall back into the abyss of the unmirrored self. That abyss is what he spends his entire life avoiding, yet it is also the only place where healing can begin. The shadow of the narcissist is profound loneliness. It is the loneliness of a soul trapped in the mirror it built to survive. And yet, within this very trap lies the key to liberation. The same mechanism that distorts the power of imagination can also redeem, for the unconscious never condemns. It only repeats until understood. If the narcissist could dare to look beyond the reflection, to see not the image but the pain beneath, he would begin the sacred work of individuation, the journey toward wholeness. Individuation requires the destruction of the false self, the dissolution of the mask, the surrender of the illusion that one must be perfect to be loved. This process feels like death because it is a kind of death, the death of the image. The ego resists this with all its might, for it fears annihilation. But what dies is not the true self, only the shell that has hidden it. To encounter one's shadow, the rejected, wounded aspects of the psyche, is the beginning of resurrection. The narcissist must meet the child he abandoned long ago, the one who still waits in the dark for someone to say, "You are enough." When that meeting occurs, the walls begin to tremble, the mirrors crack, and something miraculous happens. Empathy returns, and with empathy, life begins anew. The healing of the narcissistic mind is not achieved through moral condemnation, but through understanding. We must approach it as we would a sacred wound, not to shame it. But to reveal its meaning, the trauma that created it was not chosen. It was inherited from generations of emotional blindness. Each parent mirrors only what was mirrored to them. The cycle continues until one consciousness dares to turn inward and face the ancestral shadow. That is the essence of Jung's hidden pattern trauma transforms into narcissism when the reflection of love is replaced by the reflection of image. But when awareness returns, the same pattern can transform back into empathy. Because empathy is simply love without illusion. So when you meet a narcissist, do not see merely manipulation or arrogance. See a soul that once reached out for connection and found only absence. See a child who became his own God to survive the silence of an unresponsive world. See the divine spark buried beneath the armor of self-importance, and remember you to carry fragments of that same wound. Every time you seek validation instead of authenticity, every time you chase perfection instead of peace, you participate in the same pattern. The difference lies in awareness. To see the pattern is to begin freeing yourself from it. The tragedy of the narcissistic mind deepens when the false self begins to believe in its own illusion. At first, it was a mask for survival, a temporary disguise that kept the child safe from emotional annihilation. But over time, this mask hardened into identity. The child forgets that there was ever a face beneath it. This forgetting is not accidental. It is the psyche's most cunning defense. For to remember would mean to feel again the unbearable. Thus, the adult who walks through life as a narcissist is not consciously lying. He has simply mistaken the reflection for the real. The mirror becomes not a surface, but a world. When I explored the inner world of patients who exhibited narcissistic structures, I saw not monsters but abandoned temples, holy places desecrated by neglect. The altar of the true self was still there, covered in dust, hidden behind centuries of shame and fear. The narcissist fears shame more than anything else. Shame is the shadow of love denied. It is the echo of "you are not enough" that still reverberates in the unconscious. Every act of grandiosity is an exorcism of that shame. Every performance, every demand for admiration is a ritual to silence the inner cry that once went unheard. But the unconscious is not fooled. It records every lie we tell ourselves and transforms it into symbols that appear in our dreams. The narcissist often dreams of mirrors, of empty rooms, of applause that never ends but never satisfies. He may dream of being pursued not by enemies, but by shadows that carry his own face. These are not nightmares, they are revelations. The psyche is attempting to reunite him with his forgotten child, the one locked away at the beginning of the story. Yet he resists. He fears that opening that door will destroy him. In truth, it would only dissolve the illusion. There is something profoundly spiritual in this dynamic. The narcissist unconsciously replays the fall of Lucifer, the angel who sought to replace the divine light, with his own. But even this myth is misunderstood. Lucifer's fall was not merely rebellion, it was separation. The same separation occurs in childhood when the soul is cut off from its source of love. The ego must then create its own sun to orbit around The narcissist's need for admiration is symbolically the longing of the fallen angel to be seen again by God. Yet God never left the light, merely turned inward. The path of redemption, therefore, is not upward toward more brilliance, but downward into the shadows, where the original separation occurred. Let us speak of repression, for it is the architect of the false self, the child who experiences neglect, ridicule, or abuse cannot safely express anger or despair. To survive, these emotions are buried deep in the unconscious. They do not disappear. They become forces of possession. Repressed rage turns into the need for domination. Repressed sorrow turns into coldness. Repressed fear becomes control. The adult who seeks to control others is, in truth, attempting to control his own unbearable feelings. Thus, the narcissistic mind is not evil. It is terrified. It fears its own depth. Imagine a man standing at the edge of an abyss. He has built 1,000 mirrors around him, so he will not have to look down. Each mirror reflects a different image of perfection, success, beauty, superiority. But beneath the mirrors, the abyss waits. The abyss is the unconscious. It contains not only pain, but also life. The mirrors shine, but they do not breathe. To break them feels like death. Yet, only in breaking them can he inhale again the air of the soul. This is the paradox of individuation. You must die to the image before you can live as the self. Individuation is the sacred path by which the psyche seeks wholeness. It demands confrontation with the shadow, the parts of ourselves. We have exiled for the narcissist. The shadow is humility, vulnerability, dependence, and empathy, all qualities that were once punished or ignored. To reclaim them feels like humiliation, because the ego built its empire upon their denial, and yet the more he denies them, the more they appear projected onto others. He sees weakness in others because he cannot bear to see it within himself. He despises neediness because it reminds him of the child who once needed and was denied. Every projection is a message from the unconscious. What you reject in them is what you abandoned in you. The world then becomes a mirror of the internal division. The narcissist attracts people who oscillate between adoration and rejection, those who will mirror his false greatness or confirm his secret unworthiness. The pattern repeats endlessly: idealization, devaluation, discard. It is not love. It is a ritual reenactment of the original wound. The relationship begins as a reenactment of the child's longing to be seen and ends as the confirmation of his greatest fear that he is unlovable. Yet, through this endless repetition, the soul is trying to awaken him. Every heartbreak, every failed relationship is an initiation disguised as tragedy. I have often said that neurosis is the suffering of a soul that has not found its meaning. The narcissistic neurosis is precisely this: the suffering of a soul that has mistaken reflection for essence. Healing does not begin with moral correction, it begins with meaning. When the narcissist asks, "Why do I feel so empty?" he is standing at the doorway of truth. That question is the first crack in the mirror. It is the voice of the forgotten child calling out through the layers of persona and performance. But we must be careful here. One cannot simply kill the ego. That language is too violent and only deepens the split. The ego is not the enemy. It is a structure that must be educated and expanded. The task is integration, not annihilation. The false self must be brought into dialogue with the true self. Much as a teacher speaks gently with a frightened student, you cannot force awareness into the psyche. It must be courted. The unconscious reveals itself only to those who approach it with reverence. The first step in healing the narcissistic pattern is to truly see the false self as an illusion is an act of grace, but seeing is not yet integration. One must then feel the pain that the illusion was built to avoid. That pain is the crucible of transformation. When the narcissist weeps, not out of self-pity, but from the recognition of the lost child within that, is the beginning of redemption. Those tears are holy. They dissolve the hardness of the persona and allow the soul to breathe again. In the dream work of such individuals, one often observes symbols of rebirth water, caves, broken mirrors, or the child returning home. The psyche speaks through these images to announce that the process has begun. Yet the journey is long. Each time the person faces genuine intimacy, the old fear returns. If they see me, they will leave. And so he retreats to the safety of the image. But now awareness flickers. He knows it is false. That flicker is consciousness breaking through repetition. Every soul must one day confront its reflection and ask, who am I when no one is watching? For the narcissist, this question is terrifying. For without witnesses, his identity dissolves, but in that dissolution lies liberation. When you can bear to exist without admiration, you rediscover being itself. The self does not need an audience. It is its own witness. This realization is not intellectual. It is mystical. It is the return of the child to the heart of the self, the reunion of what was divided. The child once said, if I am perfect, they will love me. The adult must now whisper, even in imperfection, I am whole. That is the essence of individuation, not to become flawless, but to become real. The narcissist's brilliance, his charisma, his creative energy, all of these are not evil. They are sacred powers, trapped in distortion. When the illusion breaks, these same forces become instruments of healing. The one who once sought worship becomes capable of love. The one who once manipulated others becomes a guide for the lost. Every shadow, when integrated, transforms into light. So do not curse the narcissist within or without. Understand him. He is a mirror showing humanity its own estrangement from the soul. We are all born dependent on reflection. Every infant needs the gaze of love to know it exists. Civilization itself has become a narcissistic system, feeding on admiration and performance. To heal it, each individual must descend into the personal unconscious and retrieve the forgotten child. Only then will collective empathy return. The salvation of the world begins with the healing of one reflection at a time. The confrontation with the anima is where the mask begins to tremble. In every man, the anima is the image of the inner feminine, the bridge between consciousness and the depths of the unconscious. In the narcissistic psyche, the anima is not integrated. She is imprisoned. She was rejected when the child learned that tenderness led to shame, that emotion invited humiliation, that dependence brought pain. Thus, the narcissist does not relate to the feminine as a living reality, but as a projection, an idealized or degraded figure who reflects his own wounded capacity for feeling. The same applies in reverse to the woman whose inner animus has become tyrannical. Her masculine energy turns to control and superiority, defending her from the chaos of vulnerability. The anima, however, is not silent. She calls through longing, through dreams of beauty, through the aching hunger for connection that no admiration can satisfy. In the narcissistic man, this yearning is often mistaken for romantic obsession. He seeks the perfect other who will finally complete him, who will mirror the divine image he feels exiled from. But every such relationship ends the same way the mirror cracks, and he blames the other for reflecting his imperfection. What he cannot yet see is that the anima he seeks in another is the very soul he abandoned in himself. The confrontation with the anima is terrifying precisely because it forces the man to feel again. She demands that he descend from the sterile heights of idealization into the living waters of emotion. The anima does not heal through logic. She heals through suffering consciously endured. When the narcissist begins to feel genuine sorrow for his inner child, he begins to awaken her. When he can look upon his own brokenness without judgment, she appears not as a fantasy woman, but as the living presence of soul. Then, slowly, the walls begin to soften, and empathy seeps through the cracks like light through old stone. In this stage of individuation, the narcissistic persona starts to disintegrate. It is not destroyed violently. Rather, it is shed like an old skin. This shedding feels like loss, the loss of certainty, of control, of identity. But what remains beneath is something infinitely more real. The man discovers that his emotions, once feared as weakness, are actually the roots of wisdom. The feminine within him does not humiliate him, she humanizes him. To weep is not to fail, it is to return to the flow of life. Then comes the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is everything we have refused to acknowledge. For the narcissist, the shadow is immense, because he has spent a lifetime denying all imperfection. To face the shadow is to meet the child again, angry, grieving, ashamed. It is to confront the truth that the grand image was a lie built to escape rejection. In this confrontation, the ego experiences a symbolic death. The mask crumbles, and the raw psyche stands exposed before itself. It is an initiation by fire. Many describe this as a dark night of the soul. The dreams grow violent, the emotions unbearable. The individual may feel stripped of meaning, disoriented, empty, but this emptiness is sacred. It is the psychic vacuum that appears before rebirth. Only when the vessel is emptied of illusion can the self, the divine core, fill it with truth. The narcissistic mind, which once demanded worship, now collapses into humility. And in that humility, grace enters. This is where love, true love, begins its alchemy. Love is not a sentiment here. It is a force, an energy of transformation that burns away falsehood. When one experiences authentic love, it annihilates the false self because it penetrates the illusion of separateness. The narcissist has always sought love that confirms the image. Now he meets love that destroys it. This is why he resists it at first. Genuine intimacy feels like death to the ego for the first time. Someone sees behind the mask and yet does not flee. That gaze is redemptive. It mirrors not perfection but essence. The anima, when fully integrated, teaches the man to love not as performance but as participation in the divine rhythm. He no longer uses others to reflect his worth. He sees them as mirrors of the same soul, light he carries within. Love becomes service, not seduction. Compassion becomes the natural expression of his healed empathy. What was once manipulation becomes communion, and the most astonishing realization dawns that the child who was once unloved was never unworthy, only unseen. The divine has been watching all along, waiting for this return. The narcissistic mind is an alchemical vessel. The fire that once burned for attention now becomes the fire of transformation. The grandiosity that once sought to dominate becomes vision. The sensitivity that once caused shame becomes empathy. The ambition that once concealed emptiness becomes the will to serve. In this way, the shadow is transmuted into gold. This is the process the ancients called the opus contra naturam, the work against nature, against the instinct to avoid pain. By enduring the fire consciously, the soul creates its own light. I have observed in such transformations that the person often dreams of descending into the earth, finding a wounded child in a cave, or lighting a candle in complete darkness. These are not mere fantasies. They are messages from the unconscious showing that the reunion is near. The cave is the womb of rebirth. The candle is the spark of the self, illuminating the forgotten corridors of being. The narcissist's original wound, I am unseen, is rewritten as a revelation. I see myself. When this moment occurs, even briefly, a profound stillness enters the psyche. The endless hunger for admiration subsides because the self no longer needs to be witnessed to exist. The mirror becomes unnecessary. What remains is presence quiet, luminous, real. The person may weep not out of pain, but out of recognition. To be seen by one's own soul is the highest form of love. Yet, the transformation is not linear. The old pattern returns in cycles. Each return is a test not to punish, but to strengthen awareness. Every time the ego tries to rebuild the old illusion, the consciousness remembers the truth that love without vulnerability is not love. That image without soul is emptiness. That power without compassion is ruin. Slowly, the two worlds, inner and outer, begin to harmonize. Relationships become sacred laboratories where the self learns to mirror without manipulation, to connect without control. To witness such integration is to see resurrection in psychological form. The narcissistic mind, once ruled by defense and isolation, becomes a vessel of reflection for others. What was once a mirror of vanity becomes a mirror of understanding. This is why I have said that the greatest gift of the healed narcissist is empathy, for who better to understand the hunger for love than one who has starved for it. The false self, when dissolved, reveals the healer beneath. The wounded child becomes the wounded healer. It is no coincidence that many who once lived in narcissistic illusion later become teachers, therapists, or artists. They have touched the extremes of emptiness and thus carry an innate reverence for authenticity. Their creativity is no longer a performance, it is revelation. They no longer create to be admired, but to participate in the divine act of creation itself. The very wound that once isolated them becomes the portal through which the collective soul speaks. So understand this pattern not as pathology alone, but as a mythic journey. The narcissist's fall from authenticity mirrors humanity's fall from the self. The journey back is the journey of all souls, from image to essence, from reflection to light, from loneliness to communion. Every trauma, every mask, every illusion is part of the labyrinth designed to lead us back to center. When the soul finally returns, it no longer seeks the mirror, it becomes the mirror clear, still, and reflective of the divine image within all things,